Hello, welcome to
Hello.
Drawing the Owl, a live unedited vlog. It's about failure, apotheosis, and hopefully eventually success. I'm Sid Chris. I am the small metal dwarf of the RPG community. And today I'm conducting a parliament, a gathering of owls with Epidiah Ravachol. Uh,
Yes,
Hello. I hope I got the pronunciation right. Is it
you
the
did.
soft CH? Excellent.
Yeah, you nailed it.
Beautiful success. Um, Epidiah, for everyone out there, is the lead designer of the Emmy Award-winning role-playing game Dread, and also the author of the spectacular role-playing game Swords Without Master. Neither of which we're going to be focusing on today.
Yay!
Rather, we'll talk about the fact that Epi is this publisher for an evocative zine called Worlds Without Master, an up-and-coming contact juggler, and the publicist for the other small metal dwarf of the role-playing community. First off, Epi, thanks so much for joining me so late in your evening.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's not too bad, not too late yet. I pumpkin a little bit, but I'm having done some of the live streams with Eric Vulgaris on his West Coast of America time. I've learned to stretch out my Monday nights as far as they will possibly go.
Oh, fantastic! Well, as I promised you before, I won't take you too far into the twilight tonight. So we might as well start. I want to begin kind of away from game design. I want to begin with passion. So
Okay.
you've just recently started this thing called Person Teaches Epi a Thing.
Yes.
It's this incredibly compelling YouTube series where you learn how to merchandise or contact juggle.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you to engage with people on their terms like that?
Well, that's a good question. So recently, within the past I guess I graduated last year. So I went back to school about 3 years ago to get an associate's degree in accounting because I was looking at my books and like my money books, my double entry bookkeeping, and I couldn't figure it out. I was tax time came up and I was like, this is nonsense. None of this makes any sense. So I went to take a class, and that turned into more classes. And it turns out that I enjoy learning. That's a thing that I think I always knew, but I also discovered through that process that as much as I enjoy learning, I don't enjoy being a student. Like those are that's a very different experience than just learning. Like there's a lot of bullshit and cruft that comes with being a student, including like paying through the nose for textbooks and just dealing with things that you can either say, oh yeah, like this is a part that I know and I don't need to do the whatever, or just the working on projects with other students. That was hell. But during that, like, I just discovered that I fell in love with math. I didn't realize that I loved math. I always thought that I was an English major at heart. That's what I originally went to school for and got my degree in. And now I'm like, I could have spent all these years just plugging numbers into calculators. Discovering that I love calculators, that was another thing that I just didn't realize. And so when Shell Khan said, Epi, I want to tell you how to do merch, I just said, can we record this? Because I knew other people are going to want to know. I know that I was going to forget a good portion of it because that's what happens, and also it might be something compelling to watch. So we did it. It was a lot of fun. It is like if you're doing anything that you think you can turn into merch, you should watch that video because she just goes through it all, like step by step. It actually reminds me of your drawing the owl metaphor, because I don't think there's, in what she does, there isn't that conceptual gap between here's some circles and then make it an owl. Like she does take you through those steps to create the merch. And then that was exciting. I said, I want to do this with more people. Tyler Crumrine, whose last name is Badass. He contacted me and he says, I'm a dramaturge. Let me teach you about playwriting. And I was like, yes, teach me about playwriting. And then Andy Berdan, I might have murdered his last name there. I don't think I did. But he contacted me after that with this giant bulleted list of things that he could do. And I chose contact juggling off of it because I was like, that's one I wouldn't choose. That was a thing that I am not a. I don't feel like I have. I don't feel like I have a good physical awareness, right? Like the kind of presence or understanding that's required for things like dance or martial arts. I've never been good at any of them. So I thought I'd give it a shot. What I didn't know is that where I am right now, Greenfield, Massachusetts, is like the home of maybe not the home of contact juggling, maybe not the origin point, but like where it really took off. Michael Motion, who's the guy who did stuff for that did the famous David Bowie tricks in Labyrinth, is from here, I think. I might be telling lies. I should really look this up. This is stuff that people have told me since then, and I've not gone to Wikipedia to confirm it. So I highly encourage everyone who's listening to do that. Just that.
It's not like this is live and citable and recorded or anything like that. So one of the things that came up in the contact juggling episode, which I have to say is, of all three of them, are incredibly compelling.
Oh, nice.
I really, really enjoyed them. One of the things that came up is this phrase, learning is failing until you don't.
Yeah.
Which is my thesis, I guess. That's why I'm doing this. It's why I'm having a chat to you. When we do talk about your game design, how do you define failing?
Oh, okay. So that's a very good question. Okay, so having Andy say that was important to me because, like I just said, I don't think of myself as somebody who has grace, I guess is the word I'm looking for. I'm a graceless individual, and I think part of what keeps me from learning things like dance or martial arts is you see the end result all the time. Like if you go to a movie, if you watch a television show, it's always after all of the practice is done, and even the practice montages are practiced, right? Like these, like even during those, nobody looks awkward. I don't know if you've seen my what I can't remember the sinewy wrath of my game design video that where I awkwardly. Oh, okay. Well, that's I'll put a link out there, but it's I work at a co-working office, and we got a bunch of standing desks that came in some cardboard boxes that we discovered could be put together to look like a desk. And so we filmed me. Yes,
I have seen this. Yes.
Yeah. In slow motion, axe kicking it. It is the most awkward axe kick that has ever been recorded in the history of time. But that's what practice should look like, right? Like that's what these practice montages should look like, is not graceful failures, not like obvious failures, but just awkwardness. They should just look like awkwardness until they don't. So when Andy said that, like it opened it up for me. I was like, right, what I'm supposed to do here, and what I was thinking about going into it was people are just going to watch me drop this ball 1,000 times. That's fine. If that's what they want, that's what they're going to get. And when you hit that point, then it's hard to think of failure as a thing, right? Because we often interpret it as an end. Mm-hmm. Like in particular in role-playing games, it's traditionally in role-playing games, it's nope, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Try again. Often happens. Like that's D&D combat, ad nauseum there. You just roll to hit. all right, you rolled a hit. All right, somebody,
Hmm.
or what kind of came about in the early aughts when we decided, what if failure was something that said, it can't just keep trying this, it has to stop, and you have to find another way to do it.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's interesting, but that's not how I would look at failure. As like, I would say failure as a game designer, what I would think of as failure would be mistakes that are uh, like actively painful, like misunderstanding what the audience is willing to pay for, and suddenly buying like 1,000 copies, printing 1,000 copies of a very expensive book and then not selling it, like that sort of thing. But that kind of failure is easy to avoid these days. You can do Kickstarters, you can, set up ways so that you don't like hurt yourself economically. Uh, I think, yeah, no, it's interesting because I do know that my perception of failure, and like other people, I often see people on the internet being very anxious about things. And I'm like, oh, on the other side of that, you'll realize that there's nothing there to be anxious about. People, I would often encourage people back a few years ago, I was encouraging people to do Patreons before they had an audience, because even in the beginning, if you have like 6 people who are all giving you $2 every time you do something in a month, that's 12 more dollars than you would have had every month. And it's not like a Kickstarter where you have to get all of your patrons in within 1 month. If you don't get them within that 1 month, then it's done. I'm gone a little bit back on that because of the behavior that's gone on with how Patreon itself works. This whole year has been an exploration of like finding new outlets to share my games in, because of what happened in the winter when Patreon said, nope, we're changing everything.
Yeah.
We're changing this one thing that really affects the least profitable among you. And
Yes.
I was like, whew. They changed it back, to their credit. They changed it back. But that was a scary, scary time.
It was. And for anybody out there who's not aware of what that was, just Google Patreon fee changes and you will find blog posts and lists and such thing. So I want to grab hold of that economics question that you just mentioned there about selling products. So in 2014, you did a retrospective post about the first year of Worlds Without Master, in which you said this line. I want to kind of quote this, so I'm just going to look away.
Oh,
sorry.
Good.
I hold each issue accountable for the money owed to me for the work I put into it. Using my own submission guidelines, it was pretty easy to calculate the price for my own writing, editing, and game design. I can satisfy all 3 rules by paying myself the same as anyone else, just at a slightly later date. So there's heaps of really interesting things in there. But first, can you talk to me about valuing your own work? So is your work, do you believe that your work is equal in value to the other people that write for Worlds Without Master?
Oh, that's a good question. In my heart of hearts, no. But fuck that guy. So yeah, I think that like one of the things that I had to do there is to force myself to not be willing to just suck up the cost every time, right? Like that was a thing that like I was willing to do. I think we all like struggle a bit with like what the value of our work is. Like when you look at like how much a PDF for a game costs, right? It's a little all over the map. I absolutely undervalue my PDFs. I thought app pricing, that's the way place it's at. Let's do that. Until like very smart friends of mine are like, Epi, the rest of us have to do this too. And some of us understand that our value is a little bit higher than what you're saying. So that was a thing where I had to like make adjustments and realize what I was doing. But yeah, no, it's a tough thing. Like in Worlds, I was able to sneak it past myself by saying, all right, well, then I'll pay myself from the post Patreon sales, right? Like the what comes in with the Patreon largely covers what each issue costs. I go out of pocket by a little amount, but that usually comes back within the next month or so. And then I just wait for the rest of it to come in. And I actually just got done doing my numbers for the first 6 months of this year, where I haven't really published anything. I've just been, trying to get things going, and also, playing things online and trying to show off, finding new ways to demo the games. And I'm happy with those numbers. I'm not like ecstatic. I'm not super rich or anything like that, but I like where it's going. Each issue has in fact paid me back, even the infamous third issue, which took up so much time and effort, and they've all paid me back. So now it feels a little bit like all that stuff is gravy. And then inside my heart of hearts, it's like, do you really, do you deserve this? Is this yours? Is this something you're allowed to have? And I'm like, someday I intend to retire. So yes, someday. So yeah, no, it's a tough thing, right? Because and it's a tough line to hold for other people too. I have a strict word count in the magazine because I don't want to. I only have a budget of this big, and I don't want to buy a game 3 times the size for the same amount. I don't want to do that to people. I don't want to say, here's the same $200 that I would have paid if you had sold me the same game, but it only had 500 words, right? Like, I mean, that is true. If you give me a 500 word game that I love, I'm like, here you go. Here's the same $200 I would have paid if it's 2,500 words. Yeah. But yeah, so that's a thing that I constantly have to tell people, and I often tell them, like, think of it as Worlds as a way to showcase a part of your game that you really want to showcase. And like, if you have you have like a 10,000 or 15,000 word game, I can't do that. But if there's like a beating heart to that you can put together in 2,500 words, then I will pay you $200 for that, and I will send it to everyone who buys an issue, and then you are free to do whatever you want with that afterwards, and I will happily shove people in your direction. Mm-hmm. Not only that, but I will hire an artist to illustrate this game, and if you're like, I really like that art, I can't give you that art because I don't own it outright, but I can definitely tell you who the artist is, and I can make that connection happen, which is something that Nathan Paoletta took advantage of with Masks of the Mummy King. I think I had like a dozen artists working on that. That's a lot of work. That is. I'm not a manager at heart. That was not.
I mean, well, you say you're not a manager at heart, but Dig 1,000 Holes is definitely your baby, and is something that you're very good at. I guess we've talked about the failure part. We've talked about breaking even with Worlds there. How does okay, this is an interesting question to ask, because you've said words, and I want to ask what those words mean. Go for it. You constantly say, we will dig these 1,000 holes yet. What does that mean? What is the goal of Dig 1,000 Holes?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think this might be right up your alley. So the story behind the name, I think I've told a few people that, but like, there's a friend of mine who's in a band. The band is called If I Had a Hi-Fi. They're a local band to where I used to live. So they were local to, actually they were based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I used to live in Green Bay, Wisconsin, but I knew them. And I was talking to their drummer on the phone when he was coming back from a funeral for his then girlfriend's uncle who had passed away, I think, or something like that. And I asked them, this is a weird question to ask, but how'd it go? And he said, we had to dig the grave. And he goes, that was weird. And I go, yeah. And I said to him, I said, you could dig 1,000 holes, but it takes a body to make a grave, right? Like that's a very weird type of hole that you're digging there. And so he's like, I love that line. I'm stealing it. They made a song about it. They made a song where that is the chorus. You could dig 1,000 holes and it takes a body to make a grave. And it's about the creative process. It's about this thing where you just spend your whole time digging until you have a grave to put your body in, right? Like that's the so that was when it came time to name a company. I should have done the smart thing and just made it my name and just been like thrown it up in big bold letters. I didn't. I went with dig 1,000 holes, and people are like, I don't know what that is. And then later on, I confused matters even more when I made Worlds Without Master, and now I've got like all sorts of branding issues. But the point to dig 1,000 holes is that this is just doing as many things as you can, like just throwing as much out there as you can to see what sticks, to see what feels to you like what you want it to be. Like I got real lucky with Dread. I don't, we're not going to talk about Dread, but I will say this.
We can talk a little bit about Dread.
Well, with that one being the first one out of the gate, I got real lucky there. But I can't complain about it. It definitely helps pay the bills, and there's a certain amount of recognition that comes with it that has been very helpful for me. But following that up was a tough roller coaster because that's all people cared about for quite some time, and it's good to be where I am now, where people are where I feel like people have paid more attention to some of the other things that I think are the holes that have bodies in them, right? Like I think Vast and Starlit is a hole with a body in it. I think Swords Without Master is a hole with a body in it. I think, well, anyways, I'm not here to just list all the games that I like that I've made. That would be ridiculous.
You kind of have to. No, it's actually Paul Beans Forever on Twitter did ask if you can talk about some of the stuff that other people have done on Worlds that you're excited about, and I'm really interested to hear like what pieces did you see that when they were submitted to you, you were like, oh, this is what Worlds Without Master is about. This is what I.
Yeah. So the first game in Worlds Without Master is not my own game. Oh my God. I'm such a horrible person. I'm blanking on his name. Hold on. Fix it in post.
Yeah. There is no post.
Yeah, I know. This is... why am I blanking on Rafu? Thank you. Okay, Rafu. When Rafu submitted Enter the Avenger, that was the first one that came. And this game, so it's been about 5 years now, so like I can't tell you freshly what it was like, but I do remember when I saw the game. It's about you are a sword and sorcery hero in that sense that you could do great deeds, not necessarily in that sense that you're a good person who's out to right a wrong. You're out to seek vengeance for having lost a loved one or something. And the game, first of all, is autobiographical. He lost his brother to violence and had this, like he wrote this game in response to that. And the game allows you to go through the process of attempting to right this wrong, and even has rules for who uh, is responsible for it, but doesn't tell you and doesn't let it happen. So the game is very much about that, like that violence isn't a solution here, and it sit in that kind of complicated place that I really loved in the sword and sorcery stuff that I enjoyed, and I felt like that was a good spot to just start from, to say, here you go, this is the this is what I'm looking for here. I don't want I was actually hesitant to do Swords Without Master in it for a while, only until 3rd issue, obviously, but because I didn't want it to be as generic as Swords. I really don't want to describe Swords Without Master as generic, but like I wanted things to be more tightly focused, right? So this, I felt like, was a really good example of that, and wonderfully echoed later on when oh god when Josh T. Jordan and Dimphna Coy did No Longer With Us, which is a game about a fantasy funeral. This is like you're adventurers and one of your companions has died, and now it's time to put them to rest, and all of the weird things that happen. Oh, one thing I loved about that particular game, I was trying to make it part of a whole with Enter the Avenger. I feel like it's a nice echo of Enter the Avenger, but it just occurred to me that one of the things that I love about that game is that it felt to me how I used to live above a funeral parlor. I lived in New York City, and my landlord was the funeral director, and he owned the funeral parlor. And so it was definitely a weekly occurrence, but it was almost a daily occurrence to walk out into a funeral while I was either heading out or coming back home from some event, or being at work or whatever. And it really pointed out to me how weird funerals are, where most of the time when I walk through it, it's a lot of happy people because they're seeing people they haven't seen in a long time, and they're enjoying each other's company. It's a sad event, but they're, like, this is, and then every so often it's like there's somebody who's just broken down on the curb because the weight of it all is there. And then every so often a biker gang keeps circling the block because it's some guy from a rival biker gang's funeral, and who the fuck knows what's going to happen next.
Wow.
And No Longer With Us captures that perfectly. Like, it's the fantasy version of all of that. And so I was super happy about that. That was one that I was very glad to put in it. But that came later. That's
which issue was No Longer With Us in?
I'm about to check. Issue 8.
Issue 8.
So yeah.
I haven't seen that one myself, so that's worse.
And illustrated by Jabari Weathers. Oh, such a gorgeous picture. I'm looking at now on my website because now I want to make sure I get nobody's name wrong. Because yeah, I can go through all of the ones that aren't mine. There's just 3 more, I think. The Scoundrel in the Deep was another. That one, I bought that one when they said we have a game that uses matches. Like, that was
back when that was innovation.
Yeah, that was before 10 Candles came out. That was but that one's great. It's like a 2-player game, and I dig 2-player games. I have trouble writing them myself, and I think that when I come across good ones, I'm like, yeah, this is great. And I just love the game of chicken you play with the match. It's very evocative. And yeah, that one's a lot of fun. And for those that are listening, don't know what's happening here, you play a scoundrel who is in a deep, deep cavern, who has very little light left, and you have a book of matches in front of you, and you light them and you pass them back and forth. One of you is the scoundrel, the other is the deep, and you're trying to defeat the deep. You're trying to get out with this thing that you're still from the deep, and the deep is trying to get you to burn your fingers, really, is really what's happening there. Or to have all the light go out. So yeah, it's a great one. And then, as I mentioned before, Nathan's Mask of the Mummy Kings was another gorgeous addition. I like this one. Again, you building characters who've stealing from a tomb this time instead of the deep. But there are masks that you put together. Like you have half of them, two halves of them, of masks that put together to make up what your character is. And it has a nice ritualistic feel to it. Like nobody wants to be known and discovered, and that's why you're wearing these masks. But each mask comes with its own sort of powers and foibles, if you will. And yeah, I dig the feel of that game, like the game design aesthetic, which is a thing that I'm not sure we talk a lot about online, but it's a thing that I'm convinced exists, right? Like I think when you design a game, you have the game trying to do something. You have it, maybe what it's trying to do is a little bit of genre analysis, or just you think that this part is fun and stuff like that. But then the way you get to it there, not just how you talk about it, but the way the mechanics work together have an aesthetic to it that sometimes I think it's not that like the aesthetics can be at odds, although I guess they can be. I guess I don't pay enough attention to the ones that I think there are at odds. But when they do something interesting, right? Like I would describe that. Oh man, I'm gonna be very, very weird about that. I would describe the aesthetics of that game as Art Deco, not the design.
Yeah.
Not the, but the game mechanics. And I think that's a really interesting way to present a sword and sorcery adventure, and I really, really dig that. But if you held my feet to the fire, I could not explain to you why or how that fits in my head that way. It's like how some people like associate numbers with colors, or that's just something that happens with game mechanics in my head that just I'm like, okay. And then the last one in the most recent issue, which is not a very recent issue, is Vincent's Amazons. And I played that game, and anytime I play a game of Vincent's, I flip him off, tell him to go to hell, and I'm like, fuck you. And then I was like, can I publish this for you? And he was gracious enough to let me do it. So, yeah, Amazons is a great game. I dig what I like about Amazons is the reversal of the GM roles in it. Like you have two players, each of them is playing an Amazon, and then everyone else is a GM. And it's a little bit the thing about it that I liked was that it's a template, so you can say, all right, I want to write a game where I get to play a space wizard, and I'm going to write that game. I'm going to call it Space Wizard, and we're going to sit down, and all of you are GMs, and I'm the Space Wizard. So you get to design the game that makes people GM you what you want to play.
It's beautiful for that.
Yeah. I think I'm going to just quick check, because if that's not all of them, I am the world's biggest asshole. So let's just yes, that is all of them. That's all the ones that are not mine. Woo.
And I want to talk about another one of yours, which I think holds a really interesting place in not only in your oeuvre, but also in the history of role-playing games, which is the game is called What is a Role-Playing Game?
Oh, yeah.
Delightful game about astro robbers, and also a definition of role-playing games. And most notably in it, you challenge people. If you don't agree with what a role-playing game is, you have to take this game, redesign it to be what role-playing games are, and then publish it yourself, which I think is wonderful. I think the key question out of there is, if you were to step up to past Epi's challenge today, how would you change what is a role-playing game?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So the the what came from what is a role playing game, or how that came about, was that I had finished Vast and Starlit, and at the time I think I had just gone to a convention, not a game convention, but a games and education convention. In fact, they an unconference, I think is what they called it. So it was set up so that you would just not have people up on panels telling you how things are, but you were getting together in groups and talking things over and whatnot. And the general audience there, if they were familiar with role playing games, they were familiar with just D&D, or some of the, like, sort of, I would think, consider like the late 90s design, things where people were interested in coming up with skill lists and what attributes are attached to which skills, and that sort of thing. And while I was there, fortunately, a friend of mine was there who was a big fan of Vast and Starlit. And while they're having this discussion, he's like, "Oh no, but you don't need that. You don't need that. You don't need that." And then he pulled out Vast and Starlit and just slid it over, and he's like, "That's what you need." And it's just this tiny. And fortunately, the audience at that moment was receptive to that, because they were like, "Wait a minute, good. I didn't want to need that." There are definitely moments where that would have gone horribly wrong. Mm-hmm. But at that point, then I figured Vast and Starlit was written for audiences that probably were aware of role-playing games, right? Like,
I was very much so, yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to, like, shake things up a bit, but I was aimed at a particular audience. So I was like, can I write this for somebody who doesn't know what role-playing games are? So that's where What is a Role-Playing Game came from. And it, like, as that, I feel like there's certain things that game has done that I consider it like a runaway success for me. Like, it explained to my parents what role-playing games are, which is not a thing I could do despite having been involved with role-playing games since I was
I have to ask
12.
just quickly, when you say it explained to them, did you play it with them?
No, I didn't. So I know, right? Like, but what had happened was, my parents are very supportive. They were really supportive after the Dread got the ENnie. That was when they were like, "Wait a minute, hold on, something's happening here." It's not that they were like, it's not that they followed the ENnies or anything like that, but they were like, "Wait a minute, you got an award for this hobby thing that you're doing." So, and that's not to say that that's legitimate. Like, I have a lot of dumb hobbies, and my parents should not be encouraging all of them. They should just wait until I win an award for one of them, and then go, "Oh, okay, that's a thing that we should pay attention to." But so I wrote this. And I published it on the business cards. I gave the business cards to my mom, and she then sat down with my aunt. I don't think she played it with my aunt, but they went through, and she goes, "I get it now. I understand what the process is." I think there are things that I would do differently, but not a whole lot. I'm still a little bit in that design space. I'm still a little bit at where there's certain things that I made sure. I think if I were to accept that challenge today, I wouldn't write "What is a role-playing game." I would write something like "How to write a role-playing game," and it would be kind of in the same vein as "What is a role-playing game," but just like explaining what I'm doing in "What is a role-playing game." Because I think that's the stuff that I'm now, like, more concerned about. I felt like writing that allowed me to close a door on a lot of text that I'd written over the years trying to describe what role-playing games are. And, like, when did that one come out? So that came out
2013.
Yeah, right.
about mid 2013, I think.
Yeah. So, and I think if you look at that and then look at how I wrote Swords Without Master, you can see I'm in Swords Without Master. I don't fuck around with it. I'm just like, this is a game. This is what we were trying to do in the game. This is how we're going to try and do it, and we're going to go this way. I mean, I fuck around with other things in Swords Without Master, but I'm not trying to describe the hobby to people anymore. I'm more of a like, this is what this game you're holding right now is about. Which isn't to say that I think that we should all just be doing that. The Sanguine Games, they put out what was the Myriad Song was one of the recent ones. Recent, like within the past 5 years, and Urban Jungle. They do a really neat thing at the beginning of their games where they say, "Oh, you don't know what a role-playing game is? Well, then read here. Oh, you're familiar with role-playing games? Well, this is how this is different from the ones you might be familiar with." And if they do one that, because I think they've done a few that they've been powered by the apocalypse, and they're like, "Well, are you familiar with Powered by the Apocalypse? Well, here you go. This is how this is what you need to know." And I think that's a very useful way to take it on. Like being aware of your audience, the audience that's reading it is, oh, okay, yeah, okay. Let's what you got there.
I have a real feeling about this, because I'm going to quote you again. I'm going to be very specific about this.
Oh, yeah.
For reasons that become clear. I'm a raging arsehole who delights in fucking with accepted terminology. For someone who's talking about how excellent and interesting and important it is for us to be, if you're good at role-playing games and if you've played Power of the Apocalypse, you should read this. Swords Without Master is not only one of my favorite games, but it is also the most impenetrable thing to read for the first time.
Yes.
And you are a raging asshole who delights in fucking with accepted terminology. How do you reconcile this respect for accessibility and for ease of use, and also this love of making it difficult?
Right. Okay. No, that's a good question. So one of the things that's happening with Swords is that I am I'm talking to 12-year-old Epi, right? And 12-year-old Epi doesn't have a fucking clue what he's reading. I mean, I just mentioned this on Twitter today, where my beginning in role-playing games, I lived in Ohio. We moved to Wisconsin. We drove back to Ohio to visit friends and family. And my friend Matt Ross, who had an older brother, he was the friend who had the older brother who, his older brother, like, listened to Iron Maiden, had Black Sabbath posters, like it was, that was the like, we were constantly trying to get Matt Ross to bring like artifacts from his older brother's life into our lives. And so Matt Ross presented TSR's Conan, which I think had just come out or recently come out. We made characters, and that's all we had time for, and we left. But it blew my fucking mind. I was like, oh, we could be other people and we could have these adventures. And so on the car ride back, I invented a role-playing game and forced my brother to play it, my poor brother. And then when I got home, I gathered up all of my allowance and all the money I could think of. And I was like, well, Dungeons and Dragons, that's the role-playing game, right? So I'm going to the store and I'm going to buy Dungeons and Dragons. And I did. I bought the expert set. I had that is not written to teach you Dungeons and Dragons. Right. That is, right. It is. And so I just sat there and tried to figure it out. And we just puzzled over it with friends, and we try and figure out how this game worked and what it's about based on the expert set. And then when I finally got the basic set, like, I was like, oh yes, all right, all these things are falling together or whatever. But that experience of not knowing, that, like, understanding that there's something there, that there's something that you have to, but you have to puzzle through it first before you do, is actually fundamental to my enjoyment of the hobby. So there's that. So that's an important element there, which I hit upon a couple times in my a few of my games are written specifically to do that, which is not necessarily the best thing, and I know that people can get upset. But the other thing that's happening with Swords is that I tried to write that game so many times, and I hated every draft of it. And what was so here? This gets into your failure thing. This is
please.
yeah. So you can download City of Fire and Coin, which is a free preview adventure for Swords. It tells you how to play it as you read through it. I don't like it. I will eventually go back to it and try and tighten it up. I'm very happy with what I ended up with in issue 3 of Worlds Without Master, the final outcome of Swords. And what was going on there is I only kind of came upon this recently when I was answering somebody else who was asking me a question about it. I wrote Swords, I think, for a world where Swords already existed, which is not tremendously useful, and also probably an act of great hubris on my part. And I'm very happy. Like, I feel like now, 4 years and change onward, it's a world where Swords already exists. So the text, I think, works out okay. I certainly can't tell anymore. I've played this game so much and explained this game and described this game so much that I am beyond knowing what is unknowable about this game, right? Like, I can't think in a way that doesn't already assume the rules of the game. Like, that's where I've gotten to it. But I do agree. Like, I talk about how I like how these other games tell you that this is this or this is that, and then I specifically don't do it in my own games. And I think part of that is, well, with Swords, it's an aesthetic choice. There's and I think also, okay, so there's another problem that I was trying to fix here in Swords. And that is, I had to define sword and sorcery without defining sword and sorcery, right? Like, I had to tell you the kind of game. Okay, if you're going to play Dungeons and Dragons, you have a pretty good idea that you can play dwarves and you can play tieflings and you can play elves and humans and whatever, because the books say, here you go, here are the things you can play.
Yeah, if you want to be a tiefling, you get +2 charisma. Go do that.
Exactly.
It is an option. Yeah. It's a drop-down list.
And in Swords, I don't do that. I describe what rogues are and how they're heroic and whatnot, but then I'm like, now find your thing. So I had to, like, present an understanding of swords and sorcery as I knew it. And part of what was involved there was not Tolkien. Like, and they're, like, pretty famously, the term sword and sorcery came about or were popularized in, I can't think of the name, Amra, I think it might be the name of the zine. But Michael Moorcock is like, what do we call this thing that we're doing that Robert E. Howard did, that blah, blah, blah. I want to call it this. And Fritz Leiber said, oh, I call it swords and sorcery. And then that was it. It was swords and sorcery. But very specifically, he was saying, what do we call this thing that we do that's not Tolkien? That's what he was saying. And they were like, oh, that's called sword and sorcery. Boom. I think heroic fantasy is another term that people often use. I like sword and sorcery. I just, as a feel. And so I wanted to do that without saying, no elves, no dwarves, no orcs.
Yes.
It's not that I want to allow people to play that, but I know that the moment I say no elves, no dwarves, no orcs, half the people listening start making dwarves and orcs and elves. That is just how it works. And I'm happy if they do that, but I want to, here's the touchstone. I need to like bring everyone to this point. And so I had to really avoid the D&D feel. Like I had to not evoke D&D
Yeah.
as much as I possibly could avoid, which is tough. I mean, like it's a monolith. It's a
I mean, as we were saying to Evan on Twitter, like I would love to talk to you about what this industry is like without D&D, but we just don't have time. We're gonna have to talk to you again about that.
Yeah.
Because I'd especially like to know, like, oh no, I can't even. I have to give him something else. This is really important to me because it's really interesting. So, in an article in 2014, you said that we would have to wait a while. It would be well into the following year, into 2015, before we saw the finished game. What happened with Lincoln Green?
I'm still working on Lincoln Green. Yes. So I'm generally just a one-person outfit. Like I hire people to do art and other things and whatnot, but like it's day to day, it's me doing it. And at the beginning of this year, I was like I had so much energy going on behind Lincoln Green and going forward at such a pace. I got one of my most complete drafts done in time to go to Breakout Con in Canada, in Toronto, Canada, and run it there. And it was at a blast. I really enjoyed it. But one of the things that happened was that people, that not to lay any blame here, but people started paying attention to Swords Without Master.
Yeah.
And I had a moment where I really had to shift gears and say, I need to work with this. I need to not let this, swell up and then die down and then that's it. Because that's it's still in its infancy as a game. Like as far as like it hasn't reached a critical mass yet, right? I ignore Dread. Like I do nothing for Dread. I'd retweet things that people tweet at me about Dread, and that's about it. Like that's it handles itself perfectly fine. It's gone to college, and it is earned its degree and is now paying off its horrible debt.
I don't want to be too dismissive about that though, because you did have Dread House and that sort of stuff. Like you have done extra work on Dread.
Yeah, I have, but like I don't think, and I may be wrong about this, but I think that I suspect that all traffic that goes between Dread House and Dread runs in the direction of Dread to Dread House, right? Like that's
yes,
and the same with the Dread Geisha Duke Voku. I think that what happens is that in fact with Duke Voku, I was trying to say, hey, this is how I might have done Dread nowadays, and it didn't matter. Like it, and which is fine. I actually have 2 more Duke Vocal games that are both Dread based that I intend to do.
Great.
But that's just me. Like, so here's the thing. Like, this gets back to that 1,000 Holes, right? Like, a lot of these games are just me fucking around, right? So the Dread Geisha Duke Voku, you play these companions who have willfully submitted themselves to the sorceress enthrallment of Duke Voku. They've said, yes, we will do your bidding and you can cast this spell on us that will force us to do your bidding. And then as you play that game, you find out or you probably long ago have found out that that's not a good choice to make, but you start to reach that breaking point with that choice. The game is designed to be that moment when you go out to do yet another thing that doesn't matter in the thrall of Duke Voku, and you want to fight back against it. And your tool to fight back against it is this dread tower, is the Jenga tower that you have to pull from or whatever. And that is like, I am saying some things about how dread games can be run that I don't particularly like. I'm like, I don't think Duke Voku's a good guy. I think you're supposed to hate him. And I'm really happy if you come away with it going, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
So I'm saying some things. And sometimes it's okay to just say those things and have them out there. And then occasionally somebody's like, oh, wait, I just heard you. I get what you're saying. And then you're happy. And that's all you need out of the game. And other times you're like, I'm saying something and I need you all to pay attention to something that's happening right now. And I will never admit to which is which until after. No.
That's really interesting.
So I do like Lincoln Green's definitely something that's very much on my mind. I still like when I'm not working on like I'm working on getting the new issue of Worlds out right now, and when I'm on my spare time there, I'm still reading Robin Hood stories and putting things together. But like it stalled out because it just hit at a moment where Swords really looked like it could use some help. So started doing the speed runs and started we started the Discord, and that wasn't my doing, but it was fortuitous that it happened at that time. So that was yeah. But
so you said back in that 2014 article, you said that it is more difficult for you to envision a world where Lincoln Green doesn't exist than where it does.
Yeah.
Considering we're now 3-4 years on from that point, and it's been something you've had to put on the back burner. Is that still a way that you feel?
Yeah. Well, yes. Well, okay. So consider also the 3 years it's been.
Yep.
Yeah, they feel a little longer than that, but
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So Lincoln Green is a game about rebellion, right? It's about rising up against an unjust government, a corrupt and unjust government. And it's hard to, like, it's a little on the nose, which is fine. I don't mind it being on the nose, but it's also then hard to be like here's a game where we get to play at that when we're in a situation where it's like, things need to be done. So I think that's also a little bit like weighing on what's happening. I definitely like, and the other thing, the real like sort of the other thing that happens is that like I get going with it's a game with a lot of moving parts, and I get going with a bunch of the moving parts, and sometimes I'll hit one of those moving parts. Everything else is just chugging along, but that one just grinds it to a halt, and I'm like, I don't know where this is or how to fix this problem right now. So what needs to happen is that it needs to rest. I need to like come back at it with new insight a little bit later on. There's several games of mine that like when they first started, they looked this one way, and then I was like, it's not doing the thing that I want. Vassal and Starlit is one I've tried to write so many times before it came out, because I just wanted a game where you played a bunch of space criminals stuck together on a spaceship. It's a style of story that I've enjoyed quite a bit. And I kept writing these games, and I kept being dissatisfied with them. And then one day, I was like, "Oh, hey, look! They make a business card that folds in half. Let's see if I can fit a game on it." Well, why don't I make it that one game that I couldn't design?
Yeah,
and that's what happened. So like sometimes a game has to just sit until something happens, or you get again, Swords Without Master came because I was playstorming with a bunch of friends. We made Monkey Dome, and when we were done with it, I was like, oh, this is it. This I've been meaning to do this sword and sorcery game. This is how this is going to work.
Right.
It's weird because like not every game comes about that way. Not every game goes, oh, I see how it's going to be. And you have to like try a bunch of things where you don't say that until that moment clicks, and then you're like, right, that's why. Or I'm saying you. I'm pretending that my experience is universal, which is is again fucking ridiculous. But yeah. But that's generally my experience, is that like I will plug away. I will write other games that people have already written a lot. I will, I mean, we all do that. We hack other people's games a lot, but like I will sometimes sit down and go, all right, why is this written this way? What's going on here? What's not written, but like, what's the design? Like, why have they made this choice and not this choice, which seems obvious to me? Or and usually they're more right than I am about their own games. And I do that until something pops up, till something clicks, and then I'm like, oh, right, that's the solution to this, or that's the solution to that. And sometimes it comes from somebody else telling me that, like, they're like, this game you're working on, this little project that you're doing, that's fine and great, but that other game, that's the one that belongs in it. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right. God damn it.
Right. Yeah, because I was going to say a lot of your games, especially your earlier designs, or the earlier designs that we can find, either from competitions, from like hackathons, or the week-long creation things, and they are communal. They're games that you've made in small groups. How does that change how you approach things now, designing, as you said, as a one-man operation?
So yeah, I don't play really well with others. So the playstorming ones were great. We had some set rules for like what was going on, what we're going to do, and we had an end date. And the end date is super important to me. If I don't have that while I'm working with someone else, then I start to get commitment phobic. I'm like, oh God, oh, am I trapped in here forever? Is this? But if it's like a week from now, whether it works or not, we're done. Then I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Let's make this happen. But that doesn't always solve the problems. So the people that I playstormed with, I got along with really well. We just had a creative direction that I think we all kind of embraced. But also a part of what's happening with those playstorming games is that there's no stakes involved. Like, they're deliberately on the ridiculous side, and that, I think, frees you up a little bit. You could be like, oh yeah, it's just whatever. I really, for instance, I really like Trial and Terror. I think it's a really neat game, but I never thought this will be my follow-up to Dread. This will be the big hit after Dread or something like that. I just thought this is a really neat game. People should know about. I think people would have fun playing Law and Order set in a world where vampires and where you get to set the legal precedent for being possessed and whatnot. But
it's a great game, and it reads like you didn't write it as a follow-up to Dread. Like, I couldn't imagine the mountain that must look like from the bottom, being like, oh, okay, I've got this any Judges Innovation Award winning game that I now have to follow.
Yeah. And like I think that's, part of the thing that I think I really want people to embrace is that like do a bunch of stupid shit. Do a bunch of stupid shit. Like some of it will be great, but like just don't put pressure on it. Like just let it be what it'll be.
I have to talk about low pressure stupid shit with you because
Yes.
the question or the thing that people brought up to me more than anything else when I said, everyone, I'm going to have a chat with Epi, I'd love to hear what you want to talk about.
Mhm.
2 words came back more than anything else: leaf mustard.
Yes.
I don't want to do it a disservice. Can you, for anyone who doesn't know, describe like what is the Chronicles of Leaf Mustard and why?
So, all right. So, at the beginning of this year, there's a game design co-working space that showed up in my town, and that sounds like heaven, and it is a little bit. I'm not going to downplay it. I am the only analog gamer in that place. It's all digital, and half of it, little over half of it, is one particular studio. So it's a little bit like. I suspect, I've never actually asked anybody about this, but I suspect it's that the studio got the office space. It's more than they need. And they're trying to help alleviate some of the costs by making this co-working space. I went in on it because otherwise I'm working here from home in this office that you can see. I don't know if you can see my air conditioner that still
Yep.
needs to be fixed into a wall over there. And, it's just like, it starts to weigh on you when you don't leave the house for days on end. So I went into this office. I had this lovely office. I started to develop a routine, which is not a thing I've had in a while. I do the Mr. Rogers thing because I started in February. So I would come in in our February, I come in with boots on. And I had slippers there that I'd switch out. And yeah. And as I started to kind of make the office space my own, we had a little glass globe that was supposed to have some plants in it. We didn't have any plants in it. So Emily is my wife, and world famous game designer, Emily Careboss, we went to a local nursery and bought some plants to put in this. And I was like, well, this is really, I like these prehistoric fern looking things and whatnot. And then I dug out of a shoebox that we have hidden in a wall here the very first mini I ever bought, which is this gnome, this little lead gnome. And I put him in there and I just took a picture. I have an Instagram account. I was doing nothing with it. And yeah, so I took a little picture of the gnome and I did that every morning. And I think by the 3rd or 4th morning, I'm like, this gnome needs a name. And Shale Khan was like, well, it's Leaf Mustard. And I was like, yes, it is. And so it's basically, it's been a lot of fun because it's just like part of the ritual. Any day that I'm there, I'll take a picture of it, and you can kind of go through. You could see some of the plants have died, and I had to replace them. I put various things in the background. Occasionally, there's like little toys around the office that, like, there's a leopard that I will occasionally put in there with him. He's recently discovered a bloodstone. We're not sure what the bloodstone is doing.
I'm so excited about the bloodstone.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun because it's like a little thing in the morning that like it's part of it is just I think just a little bit of social media management where I'm like, because I send it to Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, and Dice Camp, the Mastodon instance, and it's just sort of like, yep, I'm still here. In case you haven't heard from me, if you follow me on Twitter, you know I'm still there. But some of the other ones, I'm a little bit more quiet on. And yeah, it's just been fun. People will ask about them. Twitter, I've created 2 moments for it now because it got too big. And there'll probably be a 3rd one coming up soon. Yeah, I don't have like plans yet, but I certainly am not going to give up on Leaf Mustard anytime soon. That's
it's fantastic. I imagine there are a lot of people who watch this and be very happy.
Yeah.
Giving up on him.
I like to think of him as like the best possible office mate, right? Like he's always got a smile. Like you can't change that. He'll always have this smile, and he's always in the middle of some adventure, and you're just like, yeah, all right, whatever's happening my Monday, it doesn't matter because Leaf's having a Leaf Mustard Monday.
Oh, that's so good. I don't want to keep you too much longer because I did promise you an hour, and we've gone through that a little bit. That's okay.
No problem.
What I do want to ask you, kind of as we start to move towards wrapping this up, is what's the piece of advice that you wish you had gotten before you started doing this whole game design thing?
So, yeah, okay. So, going into it, I guess I'll answer it one way. You could tell me if that's satisfying or not, because it may not be satisfying. I might be dodging it here. There was a thing I needed to hear, and it took me forever. It wasn't until we actually published the Dread that I understood it, but it was that it was possible, right? I think I talk about this on Twitter sometimes, but I just like in the late 90s, which is when Dread sort of first came to be. Like we didn't publish it till 2005, but I was designing it in 99 at least. Because I know the kitchen that I was in, and I wasn't living in that kitchen by the winter of 2000. But in the beginning, I'd been going to school pursuing an English degree with an emphasis in creative writing. And during this time, you got to wind back all the technology. Like PDFs aren't a thing because iPads aren't a thing because, laptops have black and white screens, it's, I think Napster just died. I think that's roughly where this was in history. So, print-on-demand technology wasn't the same. We certainly didn't have Kickstarter. There was no marketplace other than being at a convention or finding a connection with game stores or a distributor. It just really was very empty landscape as far as that's concerned. And at that time, pursuing this degree in creative writing, you encounter all of the vanity press, predatory sort of, the sort of predatory services that existed for people who wanted to be authors. And they're like, yes, we'll make you an author. You just have to pay us to print your book, know? And so I was designing Dread, but I kept it at an arm's length. I was like, this is a thing. This is a lie we're telling ourselves so that we can make up this game and play it with friends. The lie being that we're going to publish it.
Yeah, the lie of fiscal viability.
Yeah. And I think we even submitted it to James Wallace back then, and he turned us down. That's fine.
I bet he regrets that.
I don't know if he actually does, but maybe someday I should ask him. Do you regret it? Do you? I'm happy that he did. Like, I am very happy that we ended up publishing it ourselves. When we submitted it to him, we probably had a very vague idea of what the game was going to be, which sounds weird because Dread is a very almost bare bones game. When you really come down to it, you can explain it in just a couple pages. And I can go on forever why the book was so big, but mainly so it looked like a role-playing game. And the beginning parts of Dread were actually bigger than what Dread was when it came. Like the rules, we had a lot of cruft, and then when we sat down to play the first game, we ignored all of it, and it was like, oh, thank God. Like, we don't have to do any of this. That's great. And so in the beginning, though, I just very much didn't believe that it was a thing that could be made, that it could be done. And then when it was done, I was still kind of terrified of it. It took me about... So we released it at Gen Con because that's how you did. There was... I can still remember when Kickstarter came about and made it so you didn't have to release a game at Gen Con, and just made everybody's spring so much easier because it wasn't everybody playtesting their game leading up to Gen Con. But so we released it at Gen Con. It did. I think we sold it at a T-shirt booth. Like, it wasn't like... I don't even remember. I so tried to avoid admitting that I was involved in it, not because I was embarrassed with it or anything, but like, it was this big giant mental block in front of me, this idea of selling the game, because that would entice feedback, right? Like, you've now paid money for the game. Now, according to the laws of geekery, I owe you my ear.
Yeah.
I don't subscribe to that anymore. But back then, that was like, and I wasn't ready for that. And then within a year, like, a lot of people kind of warmed to it. A lot of people reacted very angrily about it, which at first I was like, what is going on? And then eventually I was like, this is kind of hysterical. Yeah. Why the fuck are you angry with me? Like, why? I don't get it. But fine. Whatever, I'll ruin your hobby. And I didn't. I ruined nobody's hobby. I don't even want to take credit for that, because that didn't happen. It would have been great if it did, but I know it did not. So, yeah. So that I get like I say the bit of advice I'd like to know then was that it was possible, but everyone else was telling me it was, right? Like, it's not like I wasn't being told that advice. I just wasn't listening to it.
Yes.
And I think that's the thing I run across with like new designers all the time, is that like, before you've published the game and after, there are a lot of questions you have before, and then after you're like, oh, those didn't matter. And then very shortly after that, you even forget what those questions are. And I think that creates a divide that looks like, because I see people being very concerned about certain things, and they want everything to be perfect the moment it happens. Like, all right, I'm going to say some controversial things.
Let's do it.
Yes. I have an editor that I love very much. That is not controversial at all. Jason Keeley. As it turns out, Paizo also has that same editor. After he has gone on to work with them, but he still does some freelance stuff for me and whatnot. And I really like working with him. I have a proofreader who I really enjoy, Bree, and so I have an editorial staff, and I myself do editing. But it's okay if your game book is poorly edited.
That's going to be the title of this episode now.
Yeah. I say this. The reason why I say this is that, like, if you're staring at if you've emptied your wallet and you're looking at it and you're like, okay, I have two $20 bills and a credit card that has maybe $64 left on it before I hit my limit. I need to publish a game. How much can I spend on editing? The answer is no. You spend most of that on your cover art, and then the rest on just printing it, or however you're going to, like, I would suggest doing a PDF. If that's where you're at right now, I would spend that money on cover art and make a PDF and make sure the cover art looks great as a thumbnail. And that's it. Like, and I'm not saying that as like, that's all you need for games, but I think a lot of people want to come out of the gate with a gorgeous full color, full bleed, glossy page, hardbound. This is a tome that people will treasure and hand down to their children. And that's fine to want to make that. But why would you want that to be your first game? Like, why would you want to make all your mistakes in that? Why wouldn't you make a stupid fucking game to make your mistakes in, so that you can then learn, and then when you do make that thing that people can hand down to their children, it's something that you've learned from all these things, right? Like this is and I'm not saying that this works for everyone. I've learned over and over again that whenever I say here's advice, there are definitely people out there where that advice is the wrong advice for them, and they should never listen to a thing that I say. Well, I shouldn't say that, but it's the wrong advice for them. I want to make sure that, like, I don't want people to think that I'm saying one size fits all here, but I want people to consider the idea that maybe the first game they make should be dumb, that it should be, or it should be a bit of a wreck, and embrace it. You know, like I buy games that look like zines all the time based on the fact that they just look like them. Just like, I'm like, oh, this is something that somebody had to say. I am super interested in it. I'm not saying that there's an audience there that's going to, like, you're not going to make money that way. You're not going to make a lot of money that way, but you'll reach people, and you'll learn as you're going along, right?
Yeah, and it sounds like those two things seem very like they seem to affect each other, in that if you're nervous about publishing the game and you're releasing it at Gen Con with all those nerves, it seems like that matches up with that desire to create the big hardbound tome that you're passing down. Like, if you're just saying, hey, I've got a game, I wanted to say something about geese, so I made the geese game.
Yeah,
here it is. That, like, lowering the barrier of entry to yourself. Interesting, very interesting.
And I think also, to tie this in with earlier stuff, this is also some of the things that are happening with Lincoln Green, because Lincoln Green is definitely a game that I'm trying to make. It's not a dumb game that I'm trying to make. I'm trying to make a big, showy game of it, and so I need to be careful with what I do there. So I will often set it aside just to be like, okay, I got to learn a little bit more before I do this. I need to read more about this, or I need to play more this way, or whatnot.
Yeah, Lincoln Green has it's this self-perpetuating thing where, now that people have waited 3 years for it, if it doesn't come out as a big hardbound tome, we're gonna have some questions.
Well, and like, that was the surprise with Swords, right? Like, my idea going into Worlds Without Master was that I would publish this magazine, and then at some point I would publish Swords as a standalone game. And I don't even know who to attribute it to, but somebody, or maybe several people around here, convinced me to put it in the magazine. And that was the smartest thing to do. It was also a very hard thing to do. Like, I really, really, I love the text I wrote for that game. I'm very, very proud of it. And then I put it out there in a Patreon. And one of the things about Patreon is that it's great for pulling money from people and putting it near your pocket, not necessarily in it because you end up spending it elsewhere, but coming very, very close to your pocket before. But it's not great with feedback loops. So I can release an issue to crickets, and then like weeks or months later, people will be like, "Oh yeah, I really enjoyed that issue." But it's not like a Kickstarter, which has like this, this built-in wave of feedback. So I released Swords, and I was like, "Oops, I released Swords." I think I released it the day before April Fool's Day. I think that I might be wrong about that. It might have been the month before. And it was quieter than I thought it was going to be, and that was a moment of like, because I put a lot into it, and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, how soon am I going to have to bury these emotions deep inside? But it turned out okay. It gained momentum. But it was definitely one of these moments where I was, when it came out, I was really nervous about what was going to happen with it. And I kept telling myself, well, you can always just do a bigger version of it again. And, that will, and that is the intention. That is something that I am absolutely working on right now. I mean, not right now. Right now I'm talking to you, but I am putting things together to do an actual full-blown book of it. But, I guess, okay, here's another bit of advice. Sorry.
No, please. This is your evening. I'm happy to be here. It's almost midday for me. I've got all afternoon.
So this bit of advice is this thing where there's people out there who are your audience, and there's people out there who are your audience who will talk to you, and they're not. The Venn diagram is not a circle. Your audience is bigger than the audience that will talk to you. That is 100%. And also, that circle, this is the big circle of your audience.
Yeah.
Here's the little circle of the audience that will talk to you. There's a crescent of assholes.
Yes.
And I'm not gonna complain about them. I just want to, first of all, just acknowledge that they exist.
Right.
And I have no problem with them, because many of them are my friends. But still, like, that's a thing that it's you can easily get caught up in people telling you, oh, if you do it this way, people will buy it. And I want to just caution people from getting starry-eyed there, like falling for the romance of that. Like, think about what you want to do in the product that you want to make, and not what's being demanded of you from this small group of this larger group, because they're not necessarily representative. And I'm not saying that they aren't. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying,
not necessarily.
Don't take that as the absolute truth, because that'll happen a lot. Like, people will have an idea that they're excited about. They'll about how you should produce your thing or put your thing out there, and they will tell you to do it. And there's, like, I don't want to even discourage people from doing that. I just want people to be like, I will take that under advisement and think about it, rather than just jumping to it, because it's, sometimes it's harder to make that thing come about than the worth of that thing. And sometimes you need to learn that lesson, and sometimes you need to learn it the hard way, and sometimes you just need to not learn it and just keep moving. So that was a really weird, sad note. So let's not end it on that.
Oh, I don't know. The Crescent of Arseholes, by the way,
Yeah.
is definitely one of the motifs that we're putting in for this.
Yeah.
Okay, let's. I mean, someone did ask me, and their words were, if Epi releases a standalone swords, will he use human words this time? I don't really want to.
No.
No, you.
So I will say this. My plan for standalone swords is I'm not going to change a lot of the text that already exists in issue 3. I am all the rules. I'm not changing the rules. I'm definitely going to add a bunch of other stuff that'll be fun to do or whatever. I'm going to keep that tone, but I am going to come at it a number of different ways in the same text. So there would be the stuff from issue 3, but there would also be a like City of Fire and Coin, a play along adventure. That one I'll attempt to make a slightly more readable version of that one. There will also be just the like, you know, the old war gamey style, this then this then this then this, like the reference manual. The
flowchart.
Here's where you can look up all of the rules.
Yep.
But as far as the tone and the language in it, I'm sorry, that is my bullshit. That is my brand.
I love it. I love it. I think if I want to end on something that's really interesting to me, in the complete list of your games that you put out, you've got circles for I own it, I've read it, I've played it. You also have a circle there for hacking it.
Yeah.
What does it mean to you to invite people to hack your games like that?
Oh, that's a good question. So in the beginning, I keep going in the beginning. When God created the world, He created IP laws, and when we were discussing Dread and sort of the license that we wanted to put it out under, we didn't quite know what was what. We didn't know what to be afraid of. We didn't know what not to be afraid of. We did. It's a Creative Commons license, so it is. I don't remember the exact license off the top of my head, so don't take what I say for it. Go ahead and look at the book, and I've actually had to issue what is the word where you try and get someone to take something off the internet?
The DMCA takedown.
Yeah, and it was just because somebody had put the full PDF up on I think Lulu or something like that, and they were selling it. And I was like, this person is not me, and it's entirely possible this was an accident. They did it so they can print out a copy. I'm happy for them to do that. That is 100% their prerogative, but I don't want them. There was a lot of stuff around that time that was weird because, like, when Will Wheaton did it, his show, he said it was out of print, and it was not out of print, and it was like, "What are you doing? It's not out of print." And so people keep asking me if it'll ever get back into print, and I'm like, "It's in print. It's in print." So, okay, so all of that. I guess that doesn't actually get to it. But so in the beginning, I was like, here's my precious baby. And then I think just very early after that, I was like seeing people doing interesting things with it, coming up with their own adventures or doing their own hacks to make new things happen. I was like, this is exciting. I really, really enjoy seeing this happening. And I think what it is that I wanted to engage in a dialogue about game design. And about a decade or so ago, I would have been on the internet talking in forums and arguing over this is the truth about game design, this is the truth about game design, or whatever. And over the years, I have found that for me, if I want to say something about game design, I have to design the game and put it out there. And Dread stands as like kind of a testament to that for me, because when I did it, people were like, no, not everyone. I shouldn't but there were definitely a group of people that were like, this is not a game. There's no combat section. Go back to your pretend world or whatever. And now it is taken as a game. Like it just nobody does that anymore. Or if they do that, then you know that they're harboring a grudge from over a decade ago. Like it's nobody new says that about it because it exists. Like it, and it's hard to argue that it isn't when it is. Right. And so part of that is designing and saying, this is what I think. And then having someone come back and say, well, this is what I think. And there are times where that takes a long time to gestate and to see that happening. You could see where this game is a reaction to that game, is a reaction to that game. I think that's fun. That's or rather, that's an interesting thing to parse out when you look at it. You're like, oh, I see what they're doing here. There are times where very obviously I'm poking fun at my friends in my game design. Like there was a back and forth with Vincent with I did Vast and Starlit, and then he did the Sundered Lands, and we were kind of doing this. But like Vast and Starlit exists. It doesn't. It's powered by the apocalypse because I was hacking read a situation, right? Like that's
right
what I'm doing there. And
okay.
So like there's a lineage everywhere. Like that you can't get fully out of that lineage. Even if it's like where you're like, oh god, this game is so bad, but if you just did this, I think I'll just design the game that does that. Or here's a game that has like one really cool inside bit and it's got all this other stuff around it I don't care about. I want to figure out how to take that out and make that cool thing work. Or does it work without all that other stuff? So yes, sorry, I lost my thread here. Basically, what it comes down to is hacking my game is inviting me back into the conversation. Right. It's saying, oh yeah, Epi, how about fuck you? And I'm happy to go, yeah, let's go at it. Or shit, you're right, fuck me, I was wrong. I'm quite often telling myself from 5 or 6 years earlier that I was wrong. Like, oh yeah, that thing you did, no, that's not as important as you thought it was. And I hope that's a good sign. I think that's it's change and it feels like growth. Whether it's benign or malignant, I don't know.
Yes, yeah, I was going to say it's change. We can guarantee that much.
Yeah,
in which direction we will find out.
Yeah.
V Hendro in the chat. She's one of the story brewers that wrote Alas for the Awful Sea, and she said, hacking my game is inviting me back to the conversation. She really likes that. I hope we see V hacking one of your games to get involved in a conversation with you there. I think that'd be
yeah.
Well, I honestly think I've taken up more than enough of your evening. I have enjoyed this so much. Thank you.
Yeah, I have too, actually. I have forgotten that this room is so sweltering.
No, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. It's all good. It's nighttime here, so it's supposed to be cooling off, but I'm just I sweat like an epi, I guess is what.
All right, well, I'll make sure we can get you out of here. Just before we go, I've put down in the description of this, I put your Twitter handle at Epidiah. I have the Dig 1,000 Holes .wordpress thing, and Worlds Without Master. Is there anything else you would like to plug, get people involved in, invite them into the conversation?
If any of your listeners happen to also be Rockford File fans, they should listen to 200 a day, but there's not a whole lot of crossover there, but who knows?
I I've been watching you put that up on Twitter, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm so glad he enjoys this, but
Yeah.
he's enjoying it without me. That's awesome.
That is, see, now you have the experience of my parents.
You have to make a "What is the Rockford Files" game and
Yes.
present that to me. Excellent. So I'll finish this broadcast now, and then I'll say goodbye to you. But thank you very much to everyone that was watching us here.
Yeah,
If you have any questions, contact me at Action Economy on Twitter, or contact Epi at Epidiah, and we'll happily invite you into the conversation.
Yes.
Thank you.